Hello, this is AstrologerCoach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming full moon in 17 degrees of Capricorn, which will be exact at 9:07 p.m. Pacific time, which is also West Coast time in the US on July 8th, and 7 minutes after midnight on the East Coast in the US on July 9th. So, this full moon is a polarity between the Capricorn energy and the Cancer energy. So the moon in Capricorn opposes the sun in Cancer. Now there's lots of planets involved in this powerful full moon chart, very important outer planets as well. Jupiter, Pluto, Mars, Uranus, Saturn, just to mention a few. And all of these planets play a really important role in this full moon chart. So buckle up, there's a lot to cover today. Now, we will also address Uranus and Mars in more detail in our next forecasting forum on July 11th. So for more info about that towards the end of the video, okay? So just stay tuned for that if you're interested. All right, so let's dive right in. So for the next 2 weeks, we have a heightened awareness that something is out of alignment, and we're looking for balance and integration. Now, the balance in question is between our inner experience, which is symbolized by Cancer, and our outer obligations or goals, which we become more aware of with the moon in Capricorn. So it's important to realize that our long-term goals need our attention and that they are the very thing that will bring us fulfillment and inner stability, which is what we're seeking with the sun in Cancer, right? So Cancer and Capricorn are both receptive energies, they're both yin energies, right? And so it's very important that we honor these feminine energies that we're going within before we go without, right? So that we go inside before we start to take action. So Cancer says we have to recognize our own needs in order to feel internally stable. So the going in has to do with really being able to understand what these needs are. And if we don't manage this, we will give our power away to others. If we don't know our own needs and what we need to, how we need to nurture ourselves, we become victims and we sacrifice ourselves for family or for the job or for whatever, right? Now, Capricorn seeks to develop an internalized sense of authority. So it wants to be in touch with its inner authority. Again, it's an inward process, and responsibility, being a responsible being in the world, right? And so this full moon asks us to look closely at the balance between taking care of ourselves, nurturing ourselves, being in touch with our needs, versus how we want to contribute to the world at large. In other words, we will have to acknowledge if we've reached limits, and we need to set some priorities in our lives. We need to say, okay, what works and what doesn't work for us out there in the world, and how we want to contribute, and what and in which way, and how can we tap into our inner authority with that, right? So again, going inward first and then taking action. So of course, all of this will resonate more with you if you have personal planets or angles within 2 degrees of the full moon, right? And I will circle back to that later towards the end of the video as well. But feel free to watch my video on how to read your birth chart if you haven't seen it yet, right? You can also email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write recording in the subject line, and then my assistant will email that to you, okay? But it's also available on YouTube if you want to just watch it on YouTube. Now, back to the full moon. Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, that's an important planet in this full moon chart, is currently in Sagittarius, and it's making a somewhat challenging aspect to Mars in Cancer. So, and that aspect is exact at the time of the full moon. So this really contributes to either a lack of physical energy, we feel a little bit physically slow or drained, or we need to kind of focus more on our commitments rather than impulsively doing things, right? So that really invites us to slow down and quieten down. That really helps us for the next 2 weeks. So just remember that if you're feeling this sense of feeling de-energized or feeling like you're not focusing enough on your commitments, just slow down, right? And that will help you to actually, do less and achieve more. So we need to get a sort of like a sense of the timing of things and what's needed at what time, right? And that will support us in actually doing less and achieving more, all right? So ask yourself, what inner attitudes need to be adjusted in order to achieve the things that are in full alignment with what I truly want, right? So what inner attitudes have to be adjusted, right? And how might gentleness with myself and my body support my long-term goals, right? And these are really powerful, beautiful questions. And with all my questions, please remember, you don't have to answer them right away. This is an inquiry, which means that you can sit with these questions, you can meditate on them, you can journal on them. They're a great way to just be with and marinate in for the next 2 weeks, so you can kind of see and get in touch with what actually comes up for you, right? Now, indecision or fear can really hold us back from taking actions. And with this aspect, we might get a sense of this little bit of anxiousness or indecision or fearfulness, right, around our long-term goals. So ask yourself, what is stirring the pot? How might I channel those feelings in a self-responsible way? Whatever is coming up emotionally, because Mars is in Cancer, right? So there's feelings that might be coming up. How can I channel those feelings in a self-responsible way, right? Saturn wants us to be responsible. And what might be possible if I took a larger, more long-term view, right? And that's because Saturn is in Sagittarius. We want to try to take a larger, more long-term view on what we're trying to achieve, right? And what if my expectations and approach to the world came from a mature self-understanding? And again, that has to do with Saturn being about maturity. Mars is in Cancer, so we need to understand ourselves, our own needs, right? And we need to be mature within that. So it really comes back down to, know thyself and you shall be set free, right? The more we know ourselves, the more we can understand and navigate the inner and outer waters, right? Because it is about the inner and the outer is always connected. And so we need to honor both, Now, as always, of course, with all the questions that I pose in this video, and there's going to be many because there's much going on, they're also going to be available on my website at astrologercoach.com via my weekly forecast. So just click on the weekly forecast link, and that will be available after July 2nd in the evening. And so you can also sign up for them for future. If you're watching this after July 2nd, you can sign up for them via email, by emailing us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecast in the subject line. Okay, and my assistant will add you to that mailing list and you will receive these weekly emails on each Sunday evening. All right, now back to the full moon chart. Saturn is also making a trine to the North Node in Leo at the time of the full moon chart, and that's been in place for a while now. But this could really indicate that we can receive support from mentors, or at least from older or wiser people than us, right? And so we have something important that we can get from these people, something that they might teach us about life, about joy, about attitudes. So it's important that we allow that to come in. We allow that connection with mentors or wiser people to just come in and give us that connection to joy and having a fulfilled, happy life, right? Now ask yourself here, what or who could I open myself up to that might change my approach to life? And really keep that an open question for the next 2 weeks, right? What or who could I open myself up to that might change my approach to life? And could I be a little bit more open to the people and things that bring me closer to joy and a playful self-expression? And I think that's a really beautiful question as well, right? So again, just sit with these questions for the next 2 weeks and see what shows up, right? Now the moon is the ruler of Cancer, so that's also a really important part of this full moon chart. And right now the moon is aligned with Pluto in Capricorn, right, with this full moon chart. So not only are we focused on our long-term goals, we're also feeling a very deep connection, or we're longing for a very deep, passionate connection to our commitments that we have out there in the world. So in fact, we might get a little bit obsessive or hyper-focused on completing a task or project for the next 2 weeks, right? Because that Pluto energy can be quite extreme, right? So this combo also asks us to take a closer look at the lower vibrations or the shadow components of Capricorn, right? Because Pluto is investigated in looking deeper into all of there is, right? All the extremes, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So those parts of us basically that are domineering, rigid, unforgiving, ambitious in a self-serving way, status-seeking, and hierarchical, right? So basically, those are sort of like the shadow components of Capricorn. And in Capricorn, this also could be connected to governments and our society at large, right? Because that's the Capricorn energy is about a society, right? And how we interact with each other in a responsible way out there in the world. So although it is important to remember with all of that, what we see in the outside world, so what you see in terms of society at large or government or in the news, right? This is merely a reflection of our inner relationship to our own shadow components. And we have to remember that, because if we can take responsibility for that, we're no longer blaming the outside world for all the chaos and all the fear that might stir up inside of us. We can start to kind of own our own stuff internally. And Pluto really gives us the ability to face our own fears and to release what no longer serves our evolution on an individual or collective level, right? So Pluto is very useful, you know, individually and collectively speaking. So as best as you can, be really honest with yourself here and ask yourself for the next 2 weeks, what is my relationship to control and survival, right? Whether that's internally or with the outside world, you know, and in what ways do I try to control myself internally with, you know, thoughts or inner dialogue, or how do I try to control others, you know, in my life, or the world at large? How do I try to control that, right? And what other feelings get stirred up when I feel out of control, right? Very often when we feel out of control, there are other feelings that that come up. You know, we get anxious, or we get upset, or we get really fearful, or we can go to a very dark place, right? When we feel out of control, or we get very rigid, right? Whatever might show up, but just observe, you know, what feelings get stirred up for you, right? When you feel out of control. And how do I respond or react to situations, people, things, or even thoughts, right, that we have ourselves that stir up a sense of disempowerment in me, right? And again, with these questions, observe, 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 you know. You don't have to answer them, just be aware, you know, that awareness in itself, you know, allowing yourself to be with an open question and just observing and being aware is very, very powerful, right? And then the last question would be, what is possible beyond surviving, right? Because a lot of the times, you know, when we get into these darker places within ourselves, there is this sense of, I have to survive. I have to make this work. I have to, you know, like there's this instinctual part of us that wants to survive, which is very human. And it's an important part, you know, that helps us to survive, obviously. So it's not that's a bad part of ourselves. But what is possible beyond surviving, right? Like what do you receive or get, or how do you live life beyond surviving? Now, Mars is also an important part of this full moon chart because it's aligned with the Sun in Cancer and it's opposing Pluto. So this combination is a very powerful one and could really test our courage and compassion for the next 2 weeks. So it is an opportunity for us here to really rebalance the masculine and feminine energies within ourselves and the world. And so what would it look like to be passionate, like the, Mars, Pluto, they're both passionate energies, and assertive, right? Because Mars, very assertive energy, without being destructive or obsessive, right? So that would be sort of the lower vibration of that Pluto-Mars combination. So again, what would it look like to be passionate and assertive without being destructive and obsessive? And again, this is something I want you to observe for the next 2 weeks and see when something shows up that goes in the direction of obsession or destructiveness, whether that's with yourself or with other people, see if you can tap more fully into a passionate, assertive energy and see, or just visualize what would that look like for me if instead of going in that direction, I'll go more in this direction right now, right? Just visualize that. And then something else that many of us will experience, of course, with that combination as well, is a stronger than normal pull towards taking things personally, right? There's this sense with Mars in Cancer to begin with that we take things very personally, but then opposing Pluto, that can stir up power struggles and taking things even more personally. So ask yourself here, what might be possible if I could keep the focus on myself? Again, keep the focus on yourself, because an opposition always has to do with how we relate to other people, right? There's a relationship component here. So what if within a relationship, what if I could keep the focus on myself? And could I simply listen to my own needs and act on them responsibly without needing to disempower myself or others? Right? Because sometimes we get scared that our needs are not being met, and then we do something impulsive or we do something out of fear that can start to either disempower others or ourselves, right? So could I simply listen to my own needs and act on them responsibly without needing to disempower myself or others? Very, very powerful question, right? And what if there was no need to fear anything, not even fear itself, right? Because very often we have this interesting relationship to fear, right? We're like, fear is bad. Fear is, we don't want fear, right? And I mean, obviously, fear is not something that supports us in a big way, when we're feeling it. But it's also important not to punish ourselves for being fearful or for having these feelings. It's a feeling. It shows up, it can move through us, and the more we can allow ourselves to just acknowledge it and be with it and move on from it, or move through with it, having the fear and moving through it anyways, right? That is much more helpful than trying to fight it or punish ourselves or suppress it. So how might I experience being protective and assertive without pushing others away? So that's also an important question here with this Mars-Pluto opposition, right? So how can you experience being protective, which is Mars in Cancer, right? And assertive without pushing other people away, without having this like defensive quality to it. Now the other part is Jupiter. Jupiter is very important in this full moon chart. It makes a square to the Pluto moon alignment in Capricorn and the Sun Mars alignment in Cancer, right? So you can see that this is creating sort of a T-square with Jupiter as the focus planet or the focal planet. And so this creates another dynamic in which passions and just feelings in general may run really high, right? Because Jupiter sort of like makes it bigger, makes everything bigger, right? So we might feel sexual tension with others. We might feel strong competitiveness. That might be possible. But also it could be stimulating us. It could feel very creative, very passionate, and could be a very invigorating time as well, right? Because again, it's Jupiter's making things bigger, whether that's on the higher or lower vibration, right? It just expands things, right? So we might need more independence during the next 2 weeks, with Jupiter being the focal point on this T-square, especially in our relationships. And patience is most likely not going to be on top of our list with this combination, especially around other people. So just be aware of that that's something that you're feeling, that's something that other people are feeling for the next 2 weeks. And as best as you can, use this energy to initiate new, deeper relationships, including a deeper relationship with yourself, right? Because Pluto wants us to go deeper, right? Wants us to be more authentic, emotionally authentic, right? So take actions to find creative solutions to relationship issues as much as possible, as much as you can. And give your body time to connect to nurturing things, to safety and to stability, because you're going to really feel the need for that. Be very nurturing with yourself during this time. And you can ask yourself here, how might I be able to strengthen my connection to the wisdom of my body and also to my inner roots, right? Because, that inner place in us that's like rooted in the earth, in the ground, right? That's a very important place because that gives us stability, that gives us the sense of safety. So how can we be able to strengthen that connection, right? And what activities might help me feel more grounded and safe in the world, right? We can also look at what actions or activities can we do more of that give us that feeling of groundedness and feeling safe, right? And how can we move away from the stuff that doesn't make us feel grounded or doesn't make us feel safe in the world, right? Then 2 more questions. How can I nurture myself to the point that I'm at once connected to others and yet completely independent? So it's sort of like it sounds like an oxymoron, right? But it is really important to be able to connect and at the same time remain completely independent within ourselves as well, because otherwise we're creating codependency with other people and relationships that are not healthy, right? And then the last question is, what would it look like to stand in my power and grow and evolve with the support of others? So again, it's the same thing, right? It sounds like an oxymoron. Stand in your own power, but also receive support from others and grow and evolve, right? So we need to be able to do both. Now, Mars in Cancer also makes a square to Uranus in Aries, which will be exact on July 17th, right? And so this aspect is not quite as strong as some of the other aspects we already talked about, but it will, within the next 2 weeks, you will start to feel it very strongly. And this really asks us to get in touch with our desires and break away from anything that is holding us back. So we may feel very restless, impatient. Again, there's this impatience that comes up. We might also become very demanding and difficult to please because we want all these different things, and we're a little bit rebellious as well at this time, right? We tend to feel like progress is too slow and that we're tired of waiting. We just move forward, right? So that's kind of the feeling of that energy of that square. And so this is a possibility for tremendous forward movement and growth, but it could also be possibly an explosive time because the rebellious urge is very strong within us, and so it presents an emotional challenge. So we really need to take a look at how do we want to move with this energy in a healthy way, right? And there could also be circumstances in our lives that could challenge us in such a way that we need to change our goals or actions even if we don't want to, right? So with this combination, stay as grounded as possible and keep breathing. Listen to your breath, right? Flexibility is going to be very important, very helpful for these next 2 weeks. Open-mindedness as well, as much as you can. And really ask yourself here, what in my life feels stagnant and needs to change? And be really honest with yourself here, right? Even if something feels like, you don't want to change it because it would be uncomfortable to step into that change. Be honest with yourself about what feels stagnant, right? And where am I able to take innovative action? Uranus is innovation, Mars is action. Where can I bring those two together and take innovative action? And how might I be able to channel this restless energy into projects that are asking for progress, right? So really channel this in a healthy way. How might physical exercise help channel this impulsive energy, right? Because Mars is very physical. Uranus in Aries is very physical, right? So how can we, channel this into physical energy? And what kind of exercise might be an energetic match to this restlessness, to this impulsiveness that we're feeling, right? So what kind of exercise could we do that will help us release that nervous energy? It's sort of like a nervous energy that moves through our body, right? So as I already mentioned at the beginning of the video, we will also address this Uranus-Mars aspect in more detail in our next forecasting forum on July 11th. So if you want to know how this Mars-Uranus square will impact you personally, feel free to join us. We will apply what's coming up to our own birth charts. And for more information or to register, simply go to my website at AstrologerCoach.com and click on that link that leads you to the monthly forecasting forum page, right? Or just stay tuned until the end of the video for more info. I'll be talking a little bit more about it later as well, all right? Now, two more things to mention with this full moon chart. Chiron. Chiron is stationing still, even though it's already retrograde. And it's in almost 29 degrees of Pisces, so it's really exalted in that degree, and because it's not moving very fast, so very exalted energy, and it's making a trine to the sun in Cancer, just like Neptune, which we'll also talk about in a second. So this creates a supportive environment for healing our insecurities, and we can bring a greater awareness and a nurturing approach to any feelings of shame that we may have experienced in childhood, and any self-depreciating thoughts or behaviors that might be showing up, right? So there's a real possibility for this nurturing, mothering, or parenting energy that can really embrace this inner wounded child, right? And this is also a great time to recognize that our so-called flaws and insecurities have become some of our best assets and strength over time, right? And so really ask yourself, where might this be true for you? Some of these things where you have felt, you maybe not, something's not quite perfect, or there's something that's where you feel separate in some way. How has that become an asset for you? And how might that be true in your life right now? What are you doing with these energies? Now, Neptune, as I already said, is also involved in this full moon chart, making this trine to the sun in Cancer as well. And this really softens the intensity of the Pluto-Mars connection. So that's really beautiful, because it really reminds us of our spiritual divine origin, right? Neptune in Pisces, it's a very internal spiritual energy that really connects us to our own divinity and our identity as a being of the cosmos, that we belong to the whole universe, right? And so as best as you can, use compassion and whatever ability you have to connect to the inner observer or the inner witness, right? So that place of you that can be completely neutral and peaceful and still, right? To really help that balance between the Cancer-Capricorn polarities, in particular that Pluto-Mars opposition, right? So ask yourself here with this aspect, could I acknowledge my human need for safety and belonging? Could I simply acknowledge it? Could I just be honest about it and say, yes, I have this need and it's okay, right? And that's part of my humanness, right? And then could I allow myself to notice the awareness that perceives all needs and desires and is also beyond them? So let me say that again, because that's a very powerful question, a very important question. Could I allow myself to notice the awareness, right? So that there's an awareness that we have that perceives all those needs and all those desires, the need for safety, the need for belonging, and anything else. But this awareness is also beyond all of that, all of the needs, all of the desires. The awareness that we are can go beyond that as well. And then could I rest as that awareness, just for this now moment. And really, this is a really beautiful line of questions that you can use in meditation, right? And so this would be very helpful to write down and use for the next 2 weeks, on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, or whenever something comes up that feels like it's tugging at you, right? So to sum it all up, the message for this full moon, we're definitely being called to stretch ourselves, right? With that T-square, grow and evolve. And we need to be happy and whole, right? That's what Pluto teaches us. And since Pluto is such a big part of this full moon chart, we need to learn how to be happy and whole. And when we experience inner balance, we can both be powerful and kind, right? So that comes back to that Pluto-Mars opposition. And we can honor both ourselves and others. And we can also know how to access both our head and our heart. So it's really about finding that place inside of us where we can really access everything. We can really be fully connected within. And again, there's a lot of these feminine energies in this chart. So it's really important to tap into this from within first and then take it to the outside world, right? So remember, with all of this, remember, no matter what occurs in the next 2 weeks, remember, we are building a new world. We are trying to connect to a new consciousness and a new humanity, new beingness, right? One person at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time. And this is so important to remember because it's so easy to get sidetracked and to get pulled into the drama, to get pulled into the chaos that happens outside of us. But the real strength that we need to find is inside of us so that we can really understand that this is a process that we're in right now. And each one of us is part of this building this new world, building this new reality for ourselves. And it is going to happen. It doesn't matter that there's chaos outside of us. It doesn't matter that there's people outside of us who are not participating in the building of this new world yet. But it is already on its way. It's already a movement that's there, right? So just keep remembering that and do your own part. Now, if you have an ascendant, career point, or personal planet in 15 to 19 degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, or Aries, this full moon chart is definitely going to be more powerful for you. You're going to feel it much more strongly. But the natal houses in your birth chart affected by this full moon also indicate which area of your life needs integration for the next 2 weeks. So even if you don't have personal planets or points within 15 to 19 degrees of those signs, take a look in your own birth chart. Where is 17 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn? Where does that land in your birth chart? And look at those houses and see what those houses represent, what they mean, what area of your life they represent. And see how you can create a balance and how you can integrate those two areas in your life for the next 2 weeks, right? And if you don't understand what I just talked about, then feel free to, once again, I recommend watching How to Read Your Birth Chart, that video. And if you don't have a birth chart yet, then definitely watch that video, because towards the end of that video, I will talk about how you can get a free drawing of your own birth chart online. And you can email us at info@astrologercoach.com and write recording in the subject line to receive that video with some handouts, all right? It's also a really great video to watch before you join the monthly forecasting forums, especially if you've been thinking about doing that and you haven't seen that video yet, right? I really want to encourage you to watch that video first. Now, briefly, let me just tell you a little bit about these forums, because they're really supportive, and this is why I have created them, because I want to make sure that we can all support each other as we're moving into this new world. And what better way to understand ourselves better and to align ourselves with the energies as they are coming, right? Month to month, right? And so once a month, I'm doing these forums, and they're really the next best thing besides getting a one-on-one reading with me. And we're going to be taking advantage of taking a look at our own birth charts actively, and you can ask me questions in advance and or during the webinar, so I can address, whatever is occurring for you as well, in terms of what's coming up with the upcoming energies. And so if you want to know how things are impacting you personally, and also be in a more interactive conversation with me, feel free to join us this next month. On July 11th, we will address the Mars-Uranus square that will become exact on July 17th, and also the Uranus station in Aries that's coming up in July. And of course, eclipse season also starts in July, at the end of July. So we will talk about all of that in our forum on Tuesday, July 11th at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is also New York time, and 11 p.m. British summertime, which is London time, right? So you can sign up to join the webinar live or register to receive an MP4 video presentation within 24 hours of the live event. I recommend joining live if you can, but if you can't, just know that you can ask questions in advance. So there is value also in getting the video presentation. And I will answer as many questions as I can within the 90 minutes that we have together, right? So just remember, this is a really fantastic way to get support. It's only $24 for the 90 minutes that we have together. And you can register right now if you like on my website at AstrologerCoach.com. And please, please, please also fill out the registration form on my monthly forecasting forum page, as well as make your payment. Because that registration form lets me know if you want to join live or if you want to receive the video presentation, and also it gives you an opportunity to ask your question in advance. And please, if possible, ask questions related to what we cover in the webinar, right? So that are aligned with what the energies are, what's coming up, right? Those are the questions that are most valuable to everybody. So I will address those questions first. And I probably might not be able to answer more than one question per person, so please keep that in mind as well, all right? Because there's a lot of people who probably want to have questions answered. So that said, you can also join me for daily forecasts on my Facebook fan page or on my Twitter page. So feel free to do that as well. That can be very supportive and very helpful too. And again, all the questions from this video are also available on my website at AstrologerCoach.com via my weekly forecast after July 2nd. I will post them, and you can also sign up to receive them in the future via email. If you email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecast in the subject line, all right? Now, if you don't want to receive emails from me every week, but you still want to be in touch with me and know about my videos or my special offers, or announcements that I make about my business, or any courses that I have, or retreats, then feel free to sign up for my newsletter, which I send out approximately twice a month. And you can do that by emailing us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line. All right? And then my assistant will add you to the appropriate mailing lists so you don't get overwhelmed. And if you have any general questions about the full moon or about astrology, always feel free to reach out to me at Sonja@astrologercoach.com. That's SONJA@astrologercoach.com. If it's a general question, I will be very happy to answer it via email. If it's something that requires of me to pull up your birth chart, something more personal in nature, I will ask you to book a reading just to honor my time and also to make sure that I can answer your question fully and completely. And you can book a reading on my website at AstrologerCoach.com. Or if you have any questions that are related to what's coming up energetically within the next 30 days or so, then definitely feel free to join our monthly forecasting forum and ask your question there. All right, so all of that is available, all of that is possible. Have a fantastic full moon. Really tap into passion and tap into this beautiful, challenging, invigorating energy that's coming up, and stay grounded within yourself. All right, this is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.